I am Joseph Peroni.
Heidi Mancini.
And you are tuned in to VegasAllNetRadio.com. This is the From Grief to Relief show, and we are heard live every Thursday between 2 and 3 p.m. All of our shows are archived for later listening. You can also buy the From Grief to Relief book on Amazon.com.
Our mission statement for our show is to share life experiences, love and courage, and strength to face life and its challenges. Every guest shares their journey through life, hopefully helping others to realize we all face the same fears and challenges. With love, hope, courage, strength, and support, we can help each other live authentic lives.
Paperback writer.
This is Joe Peroni.
And Heidi Mancini.
And we are now live on VegasAllNetRadio.com. You can buy the From Grief to Relief book on Amazon.com. So how are you today?
I'm doing good, Joe. How are you today?
Good, really good. So before we start, I want to thank the audience for their support. And speaking for both of us, right?
Yeah.
We also appreciate that our audience is intelligent, mature, and open-minded. It allows us to question beliefs and speak the truth without having to pander to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Also, as Nietzsche would say, the herd mentality. So do you want to hear a story?
Sure.
Yeah, so last week I came in about 2 hours early, and we were doing some production, so I could do that half talking thing over that song that I was trying to do. So I had a lot of extra time because I'm not usually here too much. So I'm just kind of hanging out, waiting. And one of the guys walks by because I don't know who the other people are who do the shows actually.
Yeah.
So he asks me, he says, "So, what are you doing here?" Because nobody knows who I am.
Oh, jeez.
So I say, "Well, I actually have a show." He goes, "Well, what's the name of it?" I go, "From Grief to Relief." All of a sudden, it's like radio silence. Like when anyone hears the word grief, they get real quiet.
Yep.
So he just kind of like slinked away, like end of conversation, just kind of walked away.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, that's a little bit weird, because I think we do a lot of inspirational stuff and try to do some good things. So anyway, so he walks away. I didn't think much of it, but I hear them in the other room.
Yeah.
Because I guess people actually come here to work on their shows and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he's in the other room. They're trying to figure out, a guest for the next show, or what their angle of attack is going to be, what they're going to do for their listeners. So I hear them on the telephone, and they're looking for sexual deviants.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all happy that they found this one lady in her 50s or something that can take a guy with her legs and squeeze him to death. She's like some kind of wrestler.
Oh, the scissor move?
Yeah, something like that. So I'm like, wow.
You can have pretty strong legs to do that.
I guess. But I guess, so I'm sitting there more, I'm just hanging out waiting to do the production, right? So then some more people walk by. And not to be mean or anything, but they look like, you ever see those women that are not old, but you could see that they're still struggling a lot, and they've had probably 5 too many cosmetic surgeries.
Yeah. I see that all the time at work.
Yeah, so then they got a parade of that going by. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. They're afraid of the title of our show. And I'm thinking, these are the exact type of people who need to listen to our show.
Yeah. I don't know.
I just thought it was really kind of weird.
The title's just misleading. It's just kind of weird. Yeah, because you're right. People do go grief. So what do you do? Talk about people dying? But people that know the show, like my friends and stuff at work, they got it because I've had to explain it to them. But it's funny.
Well, I'm just hoping that we're doing a little bit better than trying to pull out sexual deviants from around wherever and trying to exploit that. I don't know. Is that a public? I mean, I guess somebody's listening to it.
It's a Vegas thing,
I mean, I'm sure Howard Stern has done that for a long time, but I don't know. Maybe you can explain it to me. Let's say you get a stripper on the air. I mean, I get it. Strippers are good looking, whether it's a man or a woman. I can understand that. But if you have a stripper on the radio, where's the appeal?
I don't know. Maybe it's her voice, I don't know.
All right.
Because, I think
I'll go with that.
It would be like a visual thing, obviously, but maybe there's something with her voice or something. I don't know.
All right, so let's get to our real programming here, something real. So I wanted to ask you a question. So what would you say is your greatest accomplishment in your life so far?
Mine? Oh, mine would be finding myself.
You got to have a little more detail than that.
I would say kind of knowing who I am and setting goals and just being able to, know that I can set a goal and I can meet it. And if I don't meet it, it's not a big deal. There's other things I can do.
So if you're saying it's an accomplishment, you're saying that it was a process that you weren't always there before?
I was there when I was younger, and apparently there was a time in my life when I kind of was somebody else according to everybody else, which I didn't realize until I, started looking at myself and said, yeah, I am not the same person I was when I was, my younger years.
So you lost yourself. Where did you go?
I have no idea.
Sure you do.
I think I got caught up in life,
well, why did
everybody else's life.
Why did you give yourself away?
Because I thought that was the thing to do.
But why?
Because I have a big heart and I like to do things for people and I love people, and I just figured if I didn't do things for people, people wouldn't care about me and love me. But I realized as I got older that, I still care and I still love people, but that shouldn't be an agenda for people to accept me back, All
right, so you started to get more of a self-esteem
Yeah.
kind of thing? All right, so because we're going to be talking about that today. We have got 3 special guests with us in spirit only, but I'm taking most of their words and trying to extrapolate what they would say if they were here. Okay.
I know you said something about tomorrow's or Sunday's Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day to all those people out there. And we're going to get back to this whole discussion that we had about that, and I said I just want people to know that I have a child, and it doesn't mean that I don't care and love for my child, because some people would say their biggest accomplishment is their child, and I don't want people to think that I don't care about my daughter because I didn't say that, because a lot of mothers I think out there would say that.
I think you're 100% right. And I think that's one of the big things I wanted to talk about today, because in that is an open question.
Yeah.
Part of that is that you're supposed to try to formulate another question behind that as a follow-up.
Right.
Right? And so you could kind of figure out what the person's going to say. Now, here's the thing. Most women in today's society in the United States would say, my child is my biggest accomplishment. And that is typically that's actually a problem. Because when sperm meets egg, that's not an accomplishment, right? That's not something that's an outrageous thing. That's just strict biology. So what people may mean is, how they raised the child, how they grew from the experience of being a parent. Yeah. But when someone says it's just my kid, we have some thoughts on that, and Buddha actually has some thoughts on that, which I think is so strange and so awesome, because when I started doing some of the background for this, I realized that he died like 4,500 years ago, and yet he still has great answers for people today. So,
what's your biggest accomplishment?
What's mine?
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to hit me with that, huh?
I told you I was. I told you I wasn't kidding.
Okay, well, it wouldn't be kids. All right, my greatest accomplishment. I would say living my life exactly the way I want without compromising my true values. And I always follow my heart, and I never follow trends.
That's good.
So it's kind of the opposite of what you said in the beginning, how you lose yourself for somebody. I feel the opposite. I feel that you always need to be the best you can be for yourself, and then you attract what you want.
I agree with that. I think it takes a strong person to do that, and I think it's a male mentality, too. I mean, I don't know if all guys are like that. I know you are. But I know, generally speaking, most women do give up themselves at some point. I don't know why. I think a lot of it's societal, or even the way our mothers bring us up. And I remember my mother saying, always be good to people, and don't hurt people, and be people's friend. My dad would always say, when you get married, you take care of your husband, you be a good wife, you make sure your house is clean. All those kinds of things. So as a girl, you're brought up with some of us, I don't know if everybody is, with the thought process that everybody else comes first. At least that's how, and that maybe that wasn't how I was supposed to interpret it growing up, but that's definitely how I did, because I was a caregiver in my family because I was the oldest.
No, that's admirable. I think it's generational, too. But I think a lot of women and just people in general have understood that you can't give what you don't have. So you have to be happy about yourself.
Right.
In order to do that, you got to follow your heart. It's like, that little game. I know my uncles used to do this when I was a kid. And you used to reach behind your ear and pull out a quarter, and you thought it was the coolest thing. Well, what if you didn't have any quarters? You can't play the game.
Can't play the game.
So you can't, and just make that into other things, Like, you can't do for somebody that you don't have. You can't be humorous for someone if you have no sense of humor.
Right.
You can't provide if you have nothing to give. I can't give you water if my cup is empty, that kind of mentality. And so I kind of try to live by that as much as I can and not be too concerned with the outside world telling me if I'm good or not.
Right. Because you don't need outside validation.
It's nice. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like a total one-man island. I am human. But I try to get away from the thought of, okay, if somebody was born with more money than me, they're a better man.
No.
Or if they make more money than me, they're a better man. It's not just money. So you have to be able to live with yourself and understand that your values and you stay true to them.
Yep. And not take things personally.
So that's what I try to do. So what I want to do is, because I understand that this is a very touchy subject for parents, and I'm definitely aware of that. So I don't want this coming across as negative or that it's my words. So I'm definitely going to tell you where I got the credit, who's getting the credit for this. This comes from Buddha through the Dalai Lama. So if anybody hates these words, I'm just expressing it because I believe it could help people. But if you don't like it, you can take it up with one of the greatest thinkers in human history, right?
Yeah.
So this is entitled, or the question is, how does attachment parenting mesh with Buddhist philosophies? Now, the Buddhist philosophy is non-attachment. So the thought is this: as parents, we're attached to our children.
Right.
But in Buddhism, it talks about non-attachment. So how do you do that? That's one of the negatives right there. Immediately you would say Buddhism does not work with children. Or parenting in general. It can't. But that's because I live here and I didn't really know about that type of philosophy, and so I looked it up.
I think a lot of people are unaware of it, because most people have been brought up with Christianity, and it's just, I think it's been like the last maybe 5 years that I've been hearing a lot of people saying that they would rather have Buddhist theology than the Christian theology, because Buddha just says it's how you act, how you treat people and the kind of life you live. It's not dictated by control.
Yeah, I think there's a market for it. And I think, too, people are a lot more open to it when they realize that it's not a religion. So you can actually be a Catholic and study Buddhism. So let me try to go through this. Hopefully it's helpful. It says, first, we must recognize that, particularly with attachment parenting, parents are investing a lot of time, energy, and emotion into their children. Many people expect a return on their investment. Did you hear that? A return on their investment. And they feel a sense of ownership over their children. But this interferes with Buddhist philosophy as well as attachment parenting philosophy, because we believe that our children are unique individuals that cannot be our property and never will be and never were our property physically or in any other sense. The expectation of a return for investment can manifest itself in quite a few ways. We could end up pushing our child to reach milestones, worrying when they don't do certain things on time, or even punishing them if they fail to meet our expectations. We could push them into hobbies, push them into career choices that they may or may not even be interested in. We could be disappointed that they're not cuter, they're not smarter, they're not skinnier, or they're not better at soccer than their peers. And we do transmit that disappointment to our children through our words, our actions, and just our presence. We can start trying to control their education. We can try to control by going to their teacher-parent conferences. I don't know how we knew about teacher-parent conferences back then, but anyway, obviously it's the Dalai Lama. Or we make phone calls for the school for them in our interest, as opposed to what the children actually want or need. Mm-hmm. We can take away, and we do take away, their ability to make choices for themselves. We also make choices about what they eat and what they wear, and not exactly all the time to protect them or their physical or mental health, but because we want to project an image through our children. We feel shame and guilt for what our children do. Mm-hmm. Everyone jokes about living vicariously through their children, but most people actually do.
Yes, they do.
Now, this is not actually in line with attachment parenting philosophy, which recognizes children as unique individuals. But when it comes to Buddhism, it's exactly the opposite of what we are taught here in America. Each of us must find our own path, not just spiritually, but in life. This is how Buddhism differs from your typical mainstream parenting. So, it goes on. But I think that makes the point there that what they're talking about is the non-attachment. In other words, the child needs to be attached to you from birth.
Right.
And you need to be there in every which way. But the joy is in being a parent. The joy is not into molding them into a mini-me.
Right.
Right? So at some point, you have to let them fly. And so that's where the non-attachment comes into place. They have their own thoughts and ideas, and they're going to make mistakes, and you have to let them do their thing.
Yep, that's true.
So what do you think about that? It might be hard words to hear. It's probably a lot harder to do than it is to just say it.
Well, it's a lot harder to do, and a lot of that stuff's hard to do because, again, you live in a society where again, it comes down to what people's thought process is the majority, and that's just the way you're brought up. I mean, who knows about all this Buddha stuff unless you're raised on it? Because most of us, like I said, are raised in a Christian belief system.
Right.
And as a society, we're told that your children come first, above everything else, and that's probably why a lot of relationships fail too, because they put the kids before the relationship.
Right, and that's a big negative in terms of a relationship. Mm-hmm. A lot of people that I've talked to that have been married for like 40, 50 years will tell you that the most important relationship is between the parents, and as the parents go, so do the child. So the best thing you can do is to offer the best relationship you can with your significant other, and then the kid will have a good role model from that. Mm-hmm. But the kid is there to lead their own life. Uh-huh. In other words, so you planted a seed, and you watch this flower grow, but after that you have to kind of step back.
Right.
So let's just say for you, for instance, let's say you're waiting for your child to call you on Mother's Day. Mm-hmm. Now, I can't even imagine how painful that might be.
It's not.
Oh, well, that's
it's
even better. You're already turning into a Buddhist.
No. It's what do you want to say? It's a little hurtful. It's a little, no, I don't want to say hurtful. It's disappointing is what it is, because I expect more from her.
Right.
But on the other hand, I have a mother.
Right.
So.
But on the other hand, here's the other thing that Buddha would say if he were here. Do you need to have yourself as a mother validated by your child?
No.
In other words, you feel like you did everything you could do to be the best mom you could be.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that you need to have your child call you on that day.
No.
I mean, if she didn't, I'm sure it would be hurtful, but it doesn't make you any less of a mother.
Right.
Right? So that's what we're talking about. You need the strength inside yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't need the validation from a child. And let's say you're waiting for a phone call. In that sense, the child is serving you.
Right.
You didn't put the child on this earth to make you feel like you're a better human being.
Right.
It's the opposite. It's what Buddha would say, you need to be selfless. When you have a child, you still have to be so above it and so strong,
right,
that you become above yourself. And so you just kind of disappear into the universe. You're part of nature.
Right.
And you would just say, I'm here, she's there. You don't have to wait for her phone call to make you feel good.
To make me feel good, exactly.
You've done everything. Now, if you do, and you are waiting for that phone call to make you feel good, it kind of is an example where you put a child on this earth to serve you, to validate your life. Mm-hmm. And that's never why the kid is here. They need to validate their own life, and you need to validate yours.
Right.
So I know you've been looking at some Buddhism stuff this week. Would you like to... You kind of have a song ready for us, kind of like what I was thinking of doing last week I tried to do?
Yeah, it's a relaxation.
It's
a Zen
Did
Buddha.
you want to do it?
Yeah. I'll do
So,
it.
Randy, we're going to hook up that Buddhism song.
Oh, I think did I already hear it?
Yeah, I haven't listened
I think
to
I
this
sent
yet.
the wrong. Was it the right one?
No, that's probably it, right? Yeah, is that it?
Maybe. I guess.
All right, I'm going to let Heidi read some Buddhism for you, some Buddhism pearls of wisdom.
Top 10 pearls of Buddhist wisdom. The first one is everything changes, everything is connected, and you need to pay attention. So that means that we're all here, and don't get used to one thing because you'll be disappointed. So you have to learn to evolve and go with the flow. That's where go with the flow comes from, Joe. Each of you, number 2 is each of you should make himself an island, make himself and no one else his refuge. Each of you must make the Dharma his island, the Dharma and nothing else his refuge. Number 3, whoever honors his own sect and condemns other sects injures his own gravity. So I'm getting from that no putting down or people that have a different thought process than you. You just stick with your own self.
Yeah, just read them straight through with the Buddhism voice.
Okay.
Yeah, real calming. I'm getting into this over here.
Number 4, you can search through the entire universe for someone who is more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself. And that person is not to be found anywhere. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. Number 5, even loss and betrayal bring us awakening. And number 6, to live fully is to let go and die with each passing moment and to be reborn into a new one. Number 7, I'm not going to read number 7. That one's kind of goofy. Number 8, we are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make our world. Number 9, all the happiness there is in the world comes from thinking about others, and all the suffering comes from preoccupation with yourself. So, this one part is in here about thinking about yourself and putting yourself first so that you can be happy and help other people, and not to live in the past, each moment, every day that's a new day, to enjoy that day.
That's good. I like that. All right. Shall we move on to something else?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What I want to do today, we're talking about some kind of life strategies. I know that there's a ton of different subjects, so I'm just going to name a few. But what I want to do is I've got Buddha, Jesus, and Nietzsche, and I've got their different philosophies, and I'd like to put that all in together to see what their differences of opinion might be. So the first person we have, just to go back over this, we did some of this the other day, but just to rehash it a little bit. We've got Buddha, who lived between 566 and 480 BC. He is the son of a warrior king. We've got Nietzsche, who is the son of a Lutheran pastor. And we have Jesus, who is the Son of God. Yep. So if all three were in a room, the first problem would be is that probably I would think that Jesus and his followers might have a little bit something to say, because Buddha never gave his life over to Jesus. I've heard people say that before.
Right.
That he never accepted him as his savior. So what would the Buddha say to that? So I came up with a short little answer that he probably would say, because the Buddha would not fight. He would just maybe state a fact and move on. So here's the fact. Buddha would remind Jesus and his followers that he died 480 years before Jesus was even born. So I know that sounds ridiculous, but in the West, or like when we study, I went to Catholic school. I actually went to an evangelical university, Liberty University. Jerry Falwell Jr. is the owner of that, or the president of that school. You know, that's one of the things that they never bother to talk about. They don't want to study anybody else before Jesus. It's like they never existed. So I'd like to bring that out, that's, you know, that's kind of not fair to not look at, you know, some people that are considered to be geniuses or incredibly great, influential people just because they born and died before Jesus. I don't think that's a good reason to throw them under the bus, so to speak. All right, so if all three of them were in the room, they all want to be heard. And, of course, there's prejudices against all of them. So we just want to hit that a little bit to make sure we have that path open so everybody's listening to each other. So the first thing I would ask is, does anybody have anything to say about how their messages were altered over the years or used and taken out of context? So I think Buddha, the first thing he would say is, stop associating me with tantric and group sex.
Yeah.
You know, Buddha was a very serious guy. He preached the middle way, meaning not too much or too little of anything. He did say that sex was important, but it's not the top priority. He said sex is just another desire, and of course it can never totally be satisfied, so don't be addicted to it.
Right.
So he said you need to have a healthy attraction towards sex, right, and your partner. And he said pleasure is also fleeting. So again, sex is a part of a relationship, but it should not be the whole relationship. So again, Buddha spoke middle way.
Right.
But to associate them with, you know, group sex and all these other things,
but that's
you would have a problem.
That's another explanation of when you talk about the Bible and different things, how people build off of and make up their own belief system, that what they want to believe. And what Western culture has done with the Buddhism is they basically, you've got some people and some groups that say, oh, again, it's another form of manipulation. It's another form of taking something good and using it for something that's self-serving to them.
Right.
And they hide behind the goodness of whatever it is. The same thing with the Bible and different things like that. That's used to control people in some ways. I can't believe a lot of the stuff that was written in there is all written by men.
Right, and I think it's hurtful in a lot of ways. I mean, the biggest way is that if you go back over these masters, they're all incredible at being able to help people. And a lot of people get turned off right away just because they actually listen to all the rumors and the fake stuff. Right. And so that's why I'm trying to open that up. Nietzsche is another one, probably the greatest philosopher that ever lived. He stood for personal power and improvement for everyone. Now, understand that he lived during the Civil War here in the U.S. And he wanted rights for everyone, women, minorities, and he even said that the creation of what he called the Ubermensch, which is the Superman, is to become the greatest thing you can be, physically, mentally, and spiritually. He said that is open for everybody, including women, which is a startling statement for back then, actually. He was way ahead of his time. When Jesus made the comment about, you know, I am your shepherd kind of thing, his comment was, only sheep need a shepherd. I don't need to be a part of the herd. I am myself. So that offends some people, but that's where he came from. One of the things that Nietzsche would be really annoyed at if he were here is that a lot of people associate him and they don't want to listen to him because he was associated with the Nazi Party. If Nietzsche would hear, he would tell you he died in about 30 to 40 years before the Nazi Party ever came into power. So he cannot be blamed for something that happened generations after he was dead. So that's the fact on that. He's also known as being self-centered and egotistical, right, without empathy. But yet that's not actually true either. He was a teacher, and he told his students to find their own truth and path in life. He said, don't follow me, follow your own heart. And so, sure, he had a strong ego, and he thought you should build your ego, which is the exact opposite of Buddha. But he thought everybody should build their ego to be strong. You know, so everybody could stand alone and be strong and then have the power to come together. You can't have a relationship without being a strong individual. That's what he felt. So I think his whole thing of being egotistical was really blown out of proportion. Also, people call him an atheist, and that, he would say, is true. He did not believe that there was a God. He said he actually was famous for saying God is dead, and he said that for two reasons. For number one, He was also friends with a guy named Darwin, who did the evolution theory. And so he thought, intellectually speaking, you couldn't explain God. And just as a human being on the earth, you need to live the best life you can because you can't prove that there's an afterlife. So stop waiting for the afterlife. Do what you can do now, and then hope that things come out better if there is an afterlife. But if you can't prove it, he didn't really believe it. So that's what he thought there. He also said God is dead for another reason. He didn't mean that to be, let's say, to fight with people or to make them feel bad about what they believed in. His thought was that Jesus was a good person of compassion, and he taught very good things about love. But the problem with it is that Jesus is not on earth right now, but his followers are. And he said most of his followers don't follow the Bible. So he said, don't look at me. If you want to know who killed Jesus, it was your own followers, because they don't follow the Bible.
Right.
You know, and then he can give a ton of examples on that. But they said, if you're not following your leader's beliefs, you killed him. I didn't. I'm just calling it out. So that's what he would say. Now, if Jesus were here, Jesus stood for love, compassion, forgiveness, and peace. You would agree, right? But somehow, some way, Jesus would be really angry because he would say, listen, the reason why I'm associated with guns, hatred for gays, anti-women, and the religion is run like a big business has nothing to do with me. He would say, don't blame me. I have got nothing to do with Christianity. Actually, I died Jewish. My time on earth, Christianity never even existed. I don't even know what it is.
Right.
So don't blame me for that.
Well, I think the three philosophers, or the three, what do you want to call us?
I'm just calling them masters of human condition.
When you look at Nietzsche, he's intellectual, and he's an intellectual thinker, and you've got Buddha, who's a compassionate. He has compassion and spirit, more of the heart religion.
Yeah. And
then you've got the Christian religion, which, to me, that's a way of controlling people with rules and threats of, if you're not a good person, you're not going to go to heaven, type thing.
Right.
And I think that, if everybody could combine all these things in one clump, it would be actually a really good.
Yeah, I think they all have their pluses and negatives.
Their own pluses and negatives.
Yeah, so I think that's why I put them all together, because I think they all have their things. Now, the big question is, and people want to know this, is why do people suffer? I mean, that's like the big question, right? So the Buddha would say it's really, really simple. Number one, it's attachment and desire to impermanent things. That makes sense. Just like we talked about before on Mother's Day. If you're attached to your kids and they're living their own life, you are going to feel some suffering. So there's a non-attachment he would tell you to do. Number two, he believes that the protection and the expansion of the self will bring you just nothing but harm and suffering, because he said there is no self.
Right.
So let's say that a person comes to Buddha and they say, I want happiness. Buddha would say to them, listen, the I in I want happiness is your ego.
Right.
So get rid of that. The want in I want happiness is desire. Get rid of that. Now, all you have is what? Happiness.
Happiness.
Simple. So get rid of the desire, get rid of the ego. Simple. He has that part figured out. Nietzsche, on the other hand, says that suffering, it's the distance between where you are and where you want to be. Really simple. Which is another way of saying desire.
Right.
Right? You have a desire. So he's admitting to it, but he says it's okay. So he says suffering equals, or it is, the acknowledgement of losing aspects of your life that you find valuable. Mm-hmm. That's simple. I think we could all agree with that too. But here's the thing. He also says, why suffering? Here it is. Suffering is given to you as a gift to build you into a better person so you can be above the herd. Mm-hmm. Now that is the stuff I like, because that turns it into a positive. So I think that's a very, very strong message to hear. So you know when you're feeling bad, you know if you can go through it, you're going to be a better person at the end. Whereas Buddha would say, detach yourself completely from it. So I'm not telling you which one is better. Whichever is better for you works, but they're both excellent. In Christianity, what we learned in evangelical school, suffering is this. You're born with original sin, and we're born as broken, finite creatures. In other words, we're going to die. Simple. The problem with that is that you can't do anything about it other than give your life over to God before you die. Other than that, you're going to suffer because you're human, because you kind of deserve it, because you ate from the tree of knowledge. You know, and that's kind of the way they look at it. Some people like that.
Right.
I'm not so much. But the other part is that they'll say sinning will bring suffering. And I think we can all agree on that. If you sin or do bad things, it doesn't just hurt the victim, right? It hurts the person who's doing it, too. So I think we can all believe that. Now, the prescription for it, Buddha says, very easy. Just dissolve the self and get rid of healthy attachment, or get rid of attachments. I mean, you can have a healthy attachment, but really he's looking for non-attachment. Whereas Nietzsche would say something different. He just says, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, and then he says, you should be able to experience pain and pleasure without restriction. Just go for it and just grab life as hard as you can and don't restrict it at all.
Right.
Just go for it. As far as he knows, you only have one life to live. So make the most of it. He also says you have to give meaning to your suffering. So if you give meaning to your suffering, it doesn't become suffering anymore. It's like, let's say for me, if I'm starving and training really hard for a bodybuilding show, people go, wow, are you suffering? It's not suffering. I'm choosing to do it so I can do something better for myself because I'm trying to win. Right. It's never suffering at that point. It's like, let's say you have to work overtime for your family, let's say. People go, wow, you're really suffering. You're working so hard. I don't think so, because to provide for your family, if you give it that meaning, I mean, if you say, yeah, I'm working so hard, I can't do this, this is unbelievable. Right. Okay, that's in the negative. But on the positive side, you're doing it so your family could be provided for. And if you look at it as that, as the positive side, there is no suffering.
Right.
It's just what you're doing. It's just the cost of doing business. Now, on the other side, Christianity would say, how do you handle suffering? And what we come up with is that you turn your life over to God, and the afterlife is going to be better. Again, some people like that. Personally, I'm not really sure when you say turn your life over, I don't know what that means. Because it still means you have to get up out of bed. You have to do all the work. So I'm not exactly sure what that means. And that's one of the problems I had in evangelical school. Because I was not really sure about that.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to break for a few minutes here. I'm trying to figure out ways to play things for you without you just fast forwarding through. So what I have is a short speech by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and there's music behind it. So I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. This piece that I'm playing is called The 6 Rules, and it's from a 2009 commencement speech at USC. And I will explain a little bit more after it's over, but I think you'll really like this a lot. And here we go. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Now, of course, people ask me all the time. They say to me, what is the secret to success? The first rule is trust yourself. But what is most important is that you have to dig deep down, dig and ask yourselves, who do you want to be? Not what, but who. And I'm talking about not what your parents and teachers want you to be, but you. I'm talking about figuring out for yourselves what makes you happy, no matter how crazy it may sound to the people. So rule number 1 is, of course, trust yourself no matter how, what anyone else thinks. And of course, rule number 2 is break the rules. We have so many rules in life about everything. I say break the rules, not the law, but break the rules. It is impossible to be a maverick or a true original if you're too well behaved and don't want to break the rules. You have to think outside the box. That's what I believe after all. What is the point of being on this earth if all you want to do is be liked by everyone and avoid trouble. The only way that I ever got any place was by breaking some of the rules. Which of course brings me to rule number 3. Don't be afraid to fail. Anything I've ever attempted, I was always willing to fail. You can't always win, but don't be afraid of making decisions. You can't be paralyzed by fear of failure, or you will never push yourself. You keep pushing because you believe in yourself and in your vision. And you know that it is the right thing to do, and success will come. So don't be afraid to fail. Which brings me to rule number 4, which is don't listen to the naysayers. I mean, how many times have you heard that you can't do this and you can't do that and it has never been done before? As a matter of fact, I love it when someone says that no one has ever done this before, because then when I do it, that means that I'm the first one that has done it. So pay no attention to the people that say it can't be done. I always listen to myself and say, yes, you can. And that brings me to rule number 5, which is the most important rule of all. Work your butt off. Now, I always believe leaving no stone unturned. Muhammad Ali, one of my great heroes, had a great line in the 70s when he was asked, how many sit-ups do you do? He said, I don't count my sit-ups. I only start counting when it starts hurting. When I feel pain, that's when I start counting, because that's when it really counts. That's what makes you a champion. That's the way it is with everything. No pain, no gain. And let me tell you, it is important to have fun in life, of course. But when you're out there partying, horsing around, someone out there at the same time is working hard. Someone is getting smarter and someone is winning. Just remember that. But if you want to win, there's absolutely no way around hard work. None of my rules, by the way, of success will work unless you do. I've always figured out that there's 24 hours a day. You sleep 6 hours. And you have 18 hours left. Now, I know there's some of you out there now and says, well, wait a minute, I sleep 8 hours or 9 hours. Well, then just sleep faster, I would recommend. Just remember, you can't climb the ladder of success with your hands in the pocket. That takes me to rule number 6, which is a very important rule. It's about giving back. Whatever path that you take in your lives, you must always find time to give something back. Something back to your community, give something back to your state or to your country. Let me tell you something, reaching out and helping people will bring you more satisfaction than anything else you've ever done. Remember those 6 rules. Trust yourself, break some rules, don't be afraid to fail, ignore the naysayers, work like hell, and give something back.
This is Joe Peroni.
And this is Heidi Mancini.
And you are back listening to the From Grief to Relief show. How did you like that?
I did. I liked it a lot.
It's
like
very going out and winning, huh?
Yep.
Yeah, it was good. He knows a lot, right?
He does.
I mean, he's obviously really successful. He's done a lot of good things.
Yeah.
He's made some mistakes, too, but that's okay, too. I was going to
say, because when I listened to that speech the first time, I was actually surprised, because I don't really like Arnold Schwarzenegger that much.
Okay. I met him, and he was a total jerk. But that is just one moment in time. But listen, I am never going to take away the fact of that is one successful human being. And he has done a lot of good, and he has inspired a lot of people. True. So much so that, listen, now you know how much I care about trying to help people on the show, because on a personal basis, I don't like him. But I'm going to put his words on the show just because I think his words are so great, and he does put them into action. So I am not going to hold back on that. You know, if he can help somebody, so be it. I'm going to help it along.
So I was quite surprised when I listened to it that he would say something like that, because I didn't think he was that way.
Yeah. Let me break this down a little bit just to show you how smart he actually is. Because somebody might be listening, or you could tell a friend, what we do here is a lot of philosophy or counseling stuff, and people might generally find that boring. So let me just break this down real quick. In the beginning of that speech, Arnold says, who do you want to be? Not what, who. That is about 4,000 years old. That's from Socrates. That's his speech on ethics. So we already know that Arnold is well read.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so he's from Austria. So let me bring out some more of this stuff, because it's almost word for word. If you read through Nietzsche's stuff, which I like to do, that whole thing about no pain, no gain, that wasn't just from a gym.
Yeah.
That was Nietzsche's version of what you do about your life. We're talking about suffering, no pain, no gain. That was also from Nietzsche. That's not from a gym. Also, he talked about breaking the rules. And what Nietzsche talked about was making your own morality. In other words, again, not breaking the law, not doing something that you're going to hurt somebody, go to jail for, but break the rules. You can't be an original if you don't break the rules.
Right.
And I love that, because Arnold said it's so great in there, and he brought philosophy out to the people. So I thought that was excellent. Also, when he said think outside the box, that's right out of Nietzsche's writings too. And that's in the late 1800s. Yeah. So unless he's just channeling Nietzsche, which I doubt, he's actually read him. And one of the documentaries I saw on Arnold, he actually talked about how he loved power. He loved thunder and lightning, and he loved looking into people's biographies, like Genghis Khan, and Jesus. Now, again, I don't want to offend anybody out there. Genghis Khan, Jesus, not the same. But what Arnold was talking about was power and how to move thousands, if not millions of people.
Right.
So those are the things he studied. So that's kind of the idea that I had today, is to use three incredible thinkers.
Right. And I think, it's not to offend anybody. It's just basically to say that these are the things that are out there. And my thing is, if we could combine a lot of these different things, it would be a really perfect world, because you have the thinkers, you got the heart people, and then of course you've got the spiritual part, which is Jesus, that gives you that hope that there is a life after this and there is a heaven. So I think if everything could be kind of thought together,
which, by the way, is like the slam dunk on this whole thing, isn't it? Because I think that's the one thing we're all afraid of, is to die in some way. Like, even if we don't say it, it's we're not admitting to it. So the thing about this afterlife we're all into, and that's the one big gap with Nietzsche, is that he says he doesn't believe in it. And Buddha, as much as people want to say he was a god, he said point blank, I am not a god, I am just awake.
Right.
And he doesn't say that there's an afterlife either. I mean, he talks about nirvana, but that nirvana is the extinguishing of the self. It's not an actual place. So when people talk about this thing of reincarnation, you keep coming back, it's not a good thing. He talks about that as being a punishment. So it's more and more suffering until you get it right.
Right.
Until you disappear into nothingness. Yep. So,
and we're all supposed to be from the earth. Buddhist thought is that we're all part of the universe. Jesus said that, our bodies return to the earth, to the dirt. So, I mean, there's a lot of commonalities. I mean, I would say in the Buddhist thinking, but the main difference that I notice in, Buddhism and Christianity is that Buddhism it's a way that you live your life without consequence. As far as, like, when I was brought up as a Christian, I was told, if you do this, that, and the other thing, you're going to go to hell, you're going to this, you're going to that. So it almost makes you, it's a control thing to me. That's the way I interpret it. Like, you're trying to control me.
No, I can understand that, for sure.
Where Buddhism, again, you can make it, I mean, anybody has a choice to be whatever they want, but I think at the end of the day, with everybody's thoughts here, it's how you behave and how you get along in society, and your faith is whatever you want to, at the end of the day, whatever makes you feel where you're going to be, or what you're going to be. Whatever serves you. And I think that's, the commonality. And Nietzsche, he has a more of a hardcore intellectual way of looking at things, which is good, because, it makes people get up and do things where most times people would sit back and just be pitied, pity themselves, not want to push forward. And when you come down to it, people can say what they want, but people don't want to be around people that are naysayers and negative and doom and gloom and sad. So, anyway, that's my take on that whole.
So let's do a little quick thing on the self, because self-esteem is a big issue. If you go through the DSM, you would find out that almost every single disorder a human being can have is related to low self-esteem.
Yep.
So again, let's go with Buddha on this one. I want to know what their views are of the self, number one. And also, if you want to know the art, it's good to know the artist, right? So we also want to know how the person who's on earth at that time, how they dealt with their own self.
Right.
So I think that says a lot. So I'd say Buddha believes in no self. He said dissolve notion of even having a self. And he said you, like we were talking about before, there's no authority here to punish you. He said you're responsible for your own salvation,
right.
which also means you're responsible to be a good human being, and that's the number one goal. But here's the thing. He didn't mean to be hypocritical here, but he does believe in self-mastery, meaning to be as exceptional as you can with the gifts that you were given.
Right.
In order to do that, you have to have a self. But I'm sure he meant it in a slightly different way, in that sometimes your self becomes so big and so strong, you can be selfless, like a samurai. Their fighting skills were so good that they actually lived with no self. They just continuously just served others.
Right.
So I think there's a little bit of a communication gap there. Nietzsche talks about self-preservation of the animal. He says that even a rat has a self because you can chase one. And the reason why you could chase it is because they're running away, because they do have self-preservation. They do want to live. That proves they have a self.
Right.
And they get hungry and they will eat. It's not just a biological thing. They actually will search out food to live. So he says that you should increase your physical, mental, and emotional power. And he said the self-confident man that he is, he wants to be that to inspire others. He wants to inspire others to become Superman. That's it. So that's his thought of self. The bigger, the better.
Right.
So again, straight on power. Now, we have Jesus on the other hand. I did look this up. When you look up these other guys, Buddha and Nietzsche, on suffering, there's a ton of stuff about how they can help you go through your suffering. When you look it up on Jesus on suffering, it talks about his suffering and how you should feel bad for how he suffered for you. Which is a little bit of a play there on stuff, because it doesn't really say how to cure your suffering through Christianity, which is kind of a sad thing if that's where you're looking for your answer. The answer really comes in that you have to be dependent on salvation from God himself. So you have to turn over your life to him. So, but part of the problem is that, like I said, you were born broken. You will always be broken. According to this theory, if you don't like that, that's not me. I'm just giving you the information.
Right.
And in actual fact, as a human being, because you're always broken, you will never have self-mastery. You will always be making mistakes, and you will never be good enough. Now, the problem with that is that when you raise a child in that fashion, I mean, can you think of some of the problems that it might be? You know, I would say they're very susceptible to guilt and shame. You know, they don't want to do wrong things. They're afraid to make a move.
Right.
You know, so it gets kind of dicey on certain things like that.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I don't know if that's the strongest way to go. I like the fact that once you turn your life over, you have an afterlife, according to the words. But also when you read the Bible, it's always about he, him, what I did for you.
Right.
It sounds very egotistical. So in the Bible, Jesus or God has an incredibly huge ego, and you can't have one.
Right.
You know, you get punished for eating from an apple from the tree of knowledge. So there becomes this anti-intellectualism that's kind of exalted here.
Right.
So you want to keep the people not that smart, and you want to turn it over to your parents. As we know about parenting, we talked about it in the beginning, you have to let your child be who they're going to be. So you can take all that, whatever you like, great. You can keep it. Whatever you don't like, just throw it out and don't pay attention to it.
Well, it's some food for thought. It's just something to think about. Because in today's climate, too, a lot of people are kind of sad, and they're, you know, the overall thing in our society now, people are looking for something. So
right, and there's plenty of places to look.
Yep.
Okay, so thank you on behalf of myself and the From Grief to Relief show. I hope we pass the audition.
Happy Mother's Day.
Views views and opinions expressed on this program were those of the hosts and guests and did not necessarily reflect those of Vegas All Net Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.